Sir, can we begin now?
Yeah, you can begin.
We have about 24 people to start with, so they can join. The others can join a little late, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so may I request everybody else to please mute yourself except Clemis and I. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again this Sunday with the Indore Study Circle. I want to extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Clemis Petter, our speaker today. Please mute yourself. Kamlesh ji, please mute everybody. Okay. So I'll briefly introduce Clemis before she starts delivering her talk. Clemis Petter was born in the south of Brazil in a family of German immigrants who moved to Brazil in the early 19th century. In 1980, at the age of 10, she moved with her family to the capital of Brazil, where she studied administration and marketing and became a civil servant, serving in the public security department, where she specialized in safety for major public events, control and management of priorities in police emergencies, and was the first woman to work in the integrated emergency force room in Brazil, where the city is monitored with the use of the latest technology. She also served as a member of a committee that was responsible to open and execute the process of public auctioning of private vehicles kept in the custody by the government due to legal irregularities. Just before coming to India, she was appointed as president and member of a committee responsible for investigating corruption in the police force in the capital of Brazil. She came across Krishnamurti's teachings in 2008 through a friend who knew about her interest in philosophy, religion, and psychology and gave her a book titled At the Feet of the Master. The friend was very enthusiastic about the book, but when Clemis read it, she did not feel the same enthusiasm. She felt that to be at the feet of any master, so many things need to change inside oneself. And she thought that this book is not suitable for me. So she gave it back and asked if there are other books written by Krishnamurti. The friend said, yes, they are, but they are not good, because after some time, Krishna denied the masters. Then she just felt that these are the kind of books that she needed to read. Because to deny the master, one has to have good foundation. Otherwise, how can one deny it? So she asked if she had such books, and he said, yes, but I'll give you only on the condition that you promise never to tell anybody that I gave this book to you. She promised and got 3 books. She ran home and lay in a sofa and started reading. And when she first read the first line, she jumped from the sofa and cried, I found it. I cannot believe it. She read that book in one go from 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the morning. And so after 1 week, she read all of them and asked for more books. But her contact said no, but she had no other books. But then she got in touch with the Theosophical Society in Brazil, and they had a good collection of Krishnamurti teachings. This society meets every Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. And that's how she came to know about the Theosophical Society. In 2010, when Professor Krishna was visiting Brazil for a 1-week seminar, Clemis attended that, and through him she heard about Krishna's teachings, though she didn't know English, but she was greatly affected by it. In 2011, she came to India for the first time and spent about 6 months between Theosophical Society and the KFI headquarters in Adyar in Vasant Vihar, Chennai. In 2014, Clemis moved to Theosophical Society Adyar, Chennai, and she stays there, where she is the head of editorial department and is the host to talk to guests who visit Theosophical Society, and she talks about the society and the campus at large. She is also an international speaker for the society and has given many talks on the occasion of international conference and the World Congress that took place in Singapore in 2018. There, her theme was, what is the role of education? She also has many articles published in the Theosophical magazine, which is published monthly. Her articles have been translated and published in many languages. With these words, I'll request Clemis to please go ahead with her talk. She is going to talk about the whole life is relationship. So Clemis, the floor is yours. You are aware of the format. You can speak for as long as you want, and then maybe I'll request Harshji to make some observations. And if Dr. Gajanan Rao joins by then I'll request him also to say something. And then there'll be question and answers. So Clemis, the floor is for you now.
Thank you, Dubaji. It is it's a great happiness to be invited to talk here. Even though I hope I am able to contribute in some way, because I have been watching and listening to the previous speakers. And after that, I got quite scared. And today I'm quite nervous because it seems a bit odd that a person like me should be talking in this forum. But anyhow, I will try my best. And so I hope you are all patient and don't mind if I'm not up to the expectations. So I took this theme about relationship because I feel it is the most important one, because it is englobing everything that Krishnamurti talked about. So to start, I would like to read a small quotation that I took from a public talk that he gave in Ojai, California in 1981. There he says, life is a movement in relationship, and we have destroyed that relationship by thought. And thought is not love. Love is not pleasure. It is not desire. But we have reduced everything to that. So I feel when he says, love is a movement in relationship, that is really an extraordinary thing, because that, if we look at it, we cannot live without being in relation with other people in whatever manner it may be. And we also are in relation with ideas, with money, with tradition, which is ideas, with property. So the way we relate with those things is really what is making our world, our society. And we hardly think about this. We hardly look at it in this way, that the way we relate, in fact, the way we relate with people is a symptom of the way we relate with ideas. You see, there has been all these millions of years that we have been in this planet, human beings. From time to time, there is a teacher that comes, and the problem is always the same, is the way we relate with the teachings that he brings. So there has never been a problem with any scripture. There is no problem with any scripture. They are all good. The problem really lies in the mind who reads that scripture, what we do out of it. So we have had many wonderful teachings from Buddha, from Christ, from Mohammed. From India, we had the teachings from Krishna and so many others. But the problem is that the way we relate with those teachings, and because we relate with the teachings in a either we we make them final. We say that's the only thing that really exists, that's really is true, or we are afraid of what the teachings are saying, and so we become fearful. And with this fear, we create the relations with people and with other organizations, such as we create the idea that in the West, that only Christ is the only savior. So with this idea, we just separate ourselves from everybody else, and we think nobody else knows. Only the people who follow this particular teachings understand the truth. So this way of relating, which is a sectarian way, has been almost the way that we have related all the way during these years. So when Krishnamurti talks and when he's telling us that relationship is important, I think he's trying to tell us, pay attention to the way that you relate and pay attention to the things that you conclude in any situation, not only in religion, but in any situation. So when we read, the way we relate to Krishnamurti's teachings is also of fundamental importance, because if we come to Krishnamurti as he is the final, and he now is the person who got it all, we are just doing the same mistake that we have been doing always. So I feel that the way we look at the teachings and the way we relate with people who do not know about the teachings or do not care about the teachings is also very important. Because, for instance, we have this idea that in the Roman Catholic Church, the people go to the Mass every Sunday morning and they feel that's the thing to do, and that's how they relate with the teachings. And they don't inquire any further, and that's how they settle the whole thing. So, and that has been done in almost every religion. The Christians go to the church, the Muslims go to the mosque, the Indians go to the temple. So, and that has been what we have been doing. So I feel that here now we have to be careful that we don't repeat the same, in the sense that we have a wonderful teachings and to be applied in the whole of our life, not only in a small segment. What I am trying to say is this: when we are in a Krishnamurti group of discussion or dialogue or something like that, we have a certain, we know that it is important to listen, because this is one of the things that Krishnamurti taught us. And we see it is really important that we listen. Listen means listen without any prejudice, without any conclusion, and without any previous assumption, just to listen. So this is really an extraordinary thing, but it is not to be done only when we are in the Krishnamurti group. This is something that has to be done. This dialogue is something that we have to learn. It's something to learn and to apply it in the whole of our life. So when we go home and we relate with our relatives, wife, husband, children, so do we listen to them? Or we think we have this idea that we know already what that relation is supposed to be. Suppose the wife and the husband, they have this idea what are the roles of each one. And that's how we carry on the relationship. The father and the mother also have the firm idea about what the child should do and how it should behave and what is expected from her. And that's how we should relate with the child as a mother or as a father. So this means when we have this kind of setup, we don't listen. We don't listen to the child. Because if the child has a problem, suppose the child has a problem, any problem, something, I will give a personal example. I have a son. When he was very small, I used to always talk to him. And when he was very small, whatever he did, if he broke something at home, when I was coming home, he was waiting for me to tell me. He would say, Mother, I did something. Are you going to be upset? I said, no, tell me, just tell me. And then he would tell what he did. And sometimes it was a small thing, but sometimes it was not so small. So that trust has to be there in any relationship. The trust that you can be yourself, that you can talk openly without being judged and without being discriminated because you are the way you are. So, and the way we relate with people is just a symptom of the way we relate with everything else in life. Suppose for a person, money is something very important. So the way we will relate with people has always that in its background. Suppose somebody asks for something and I am short of money, and money is something very important for me, I will be harsh to that person. Like, how can she even ask me? I don't have any money or something like that. So because we have this important things that we consider to be very important in our background, that will come out in our relationship with people. And it is this kind of relationship that has been pervading in the world. And it is this kind of relationship that has created this world. For instance, parents, they feel, most of them at least, feel it very insulting when a child asks some question that embarrasses them. Like they did something and the child realizes it and asks them. They feel embarrassed because they don't have any explanation for that. And they know that they are wrong. So the child should not ask. How can she ask such things? I'm your father. So this authoritative way of relating is what has created the world that we are living in. See, that does not mean that there is no authority between mother, father, and child. There is a natural authority, but that is natural. It does not have to be imposed. Because the child knows it, and naturally it has a lot of respect for the mother, for the father from very small age. We destroy that respect with authority. When we want to impose to the child, when we don't respect the child, when we don't listen to the child, at that moment, we are destroying the natural respect and the natural, which comes from love, really. But we destroy it because we are authoritative and we don't want to be questioned, and we don't want to be, we want to be sure that that child will always do what I want her to do. So there is no real respect to the person, to that child that is in front of me. And you see, every child, every person is a unique person. Unique in the sense that we are never the same as any other person. Even brothers and sisters, they are brought up in the same family, in the same environment, given the same education in the same school, but they are different. So this difference has to be respected, and we seem to feel it very difficult to do so. So, but we also don't see that because we take for granted that is our right. It is my right as mother, it is my right as father, it is my right as a husband or a wife. So we take so many things for granted, and because of that, we don't see what really is happening, what really we are doing. And the pain that is coming out of this kind of relationship, and the pain that we are creating, because that child will be a grown-up person at some point, and will just continue that same pattern that we have taught them. So we are teaching the children to be just like we are. And we are killing all their curiosity and all their creativity when we ask them and when we tell them what life is, when we tell them how to behave. I know that that's a very difficult pill to swallow, because we feel we know, because since we are grown up and we are mothers and fathers, we know how the child should behave. But to be honest, we don't even know how we should behave. You know, we are behaving in ways that are not appropriate, and many times we create difficulties and problems for ourselves and for others. And in this, we feel that we still have the authority and the capacity to tell a child how to behave. So we don't allow the child to explore, to try to find out, and to be free to explore. And to have, you see, this, why I'm talking so much about mother-father relationship with the child, because that's where the whole mischief begins, you know. Our childhood, we are these children who have been educated like that. And because we have been educated like that, we feel that's the way to educate our children. And we keep on passing the same pattern from generation to generation. So it is important that the child feels that there is a partnership, that she will be supported, whatever happens. We are afraid because we think, oh, but then many bad things may happen. If you look at the youth, what they are doing, you know, it may be very bad if we just leave them. You see, it is so bad because we have not let them. And they are struggling. It does not mean that we should just let them and forget them. No, there should be partnership. There should be real connection, which does not happen when we have this authoritative way of relation. So another thing, another quote that I would like to share is from a book that KFI released now during this pandemic. And for me, this was the most wonderful thing that the KFI could do. It is really a book. It became an, I got it, it's not yet printed, I think. I don't know if it is going to be printed, but it is called, I think it is called Crisis. I think it is Crisis. But it is a book with many quotes from many talks that Krishnamurti gave. And here, Krishnamurti is saying something really, really important that I really would like everybody to pay attention to this, because I felt this was a key revelation to me, in the sense I never thought like that. He's saying, because in the ancient days, they were a group of people who were free from ambition and authority, from bondages of greed and ill will. It helped to guide society away from spiritual and moral degradation. The larger the group, the greater the security of the society, of the state. And for this reason, only 1 or 2 countries like India have survived, because there are very few people who are not caught up in the turmoil of the world. You are in an extraordinary crisis. So here he is saying that if there is a group of people who are interested in living a life free from greed, free from ambition, free from all these ugly things that are going on in society, that group, because they live in real friendship, because they live really connected to each other, and therefore connected to the whole of humanity, this group is able to protect society from moral and spiritual degradation. And he's saying that because nowadays there are so few people that live free from the turmoil of the world, we are in this tremendous crisis. To me, this was really an extraordinary thing to read, because I have never seen him talking like this. And this is also giving us a tremendous responsibility, because we are the people who are reading these things. We are the people who are listening to him. And it is our responsibility that we take it seriously. It doesn't matter how far we can go. That is not a problem. If we are sincere and if we are honest, that's enough. That's my feeling. You know, it's not a question of becoming enlightened or not. That is the least of our problems. And we should not even think about that really, because Krishnamurti also emphasized that we should be concerned with flowering in goodness and not so much in enlightenment. So, and because there is so little goodness in our relationships, the world has become so degenerated, and our relationships are becoming more and more degenerated. The way that things are going in the whole world, it is really, really sad, because there is a absolute lack of respect for nature that is almost insane. We have detached so much from nature that we feel really that we are not part of nature, that we are separate, that we are something completely, we really believe, or we don't even think about it, that if we destroy the whole planet, the whole nature, the whole trees, we will still be alive and we will survive. How can we? You see, we don't really think about anything. We just go about doing whatever is profitable. It has become so important, this whole question of money, that it is really an insane thing. Then he also says, because of this question of money, we feel very insecure that we should have lots of money, otherwise we will be, how are we going to survive? How are we going to do things in life? He's saying something also in the same book. He says, in seeking the real, bread will be supplied. But if we seek only bread, then that will be destroyed. Then even that will be destroyed. Bread is not the ultimate value. When we make of it into the ultimate, there is disaster, there is murder, there is starvation. Through the transient, seek the eternal. There is no path to it, or it is the ever present. So here, in this, there are two very important things that I felt, which is because we are so worried about profit and about amassing more and more and more, we have created this destruction that is going on, because each one wants to make more and more profit. And our children are being trained for that in the schools, to be very successful. And successful means make lots of money, be rich, have wonderful cars, travel all over. That is what most of the people understand by success. Whereas real success is to be human. Real success is to be able to feel something, to feel when you see a beggar that touch you, you feel to cry. How come have we let this come to this point that people have to live on garbage? And we have let it come to this, and it is there, and nobody cares. How have we let the rivers be so polluted? How have we come to this point that we almost have no water to drink anymore? I myself, in Brazil, we have a city which is huge, and it is a huge river running in the middle of the city that stinks like anything. fully polluted. Nobody can even, not, if you fall in there, you will not come out alive. So how have we let things come to this point? We have become so insensitive because we don't see anything, we don't look at anything with eyes of interest. So we look at everything with eyes of how can I make profit from it? And we are all interested in our own profit. And we don't care that so many rivers are being destroyed. See, here where I live in Chennai, I think 2 years ago, we had a horrible shortage of water. And there is a huge river running in the middle of the city also, but cannot be used at all. You can hardly live near it, let alone use this water. So how come have we, and we don't see the tragedy of it? How come have we become like this? And this is what is happening. That's the truth, you know. This is not something that anybody needs to tell us. It is just under our nose. Then we have now this pandemic and people are fighting who is going to get the first vaccine. So for me, personally speaking, this pandemic, the disease is not the worst thing. The worst thing that I see in it is the way that people treat each other. In hospitals, horrible things are happening, at least in the West, where I have news from there. People are being neglected because other people are scared of catching the disease. So to me, this is worse than the disease itself. When we cannot have the heart to help a human being because we are afraid of coming near him because we will catch some stupid thing. And that is because we are so self-centered that we care only for ourselves. We don't think about, we cannot forget ourselves and do something without thinking about ourselves. Just for the sake of that thing that we are doing. So Krishnamurti also said something else in the same book, which I really like, and I'm really glad that KFI brought this book to us. He says also, so what is the true work of man? Surely the true work of man is to discover truth, God. It is to love and not to be caught in his own self-enclosing activities. In the very discovery of what is true, there is love. And that love in man's relationship with man will create a different civilization, a new world. So the hope for a different civilization, for a new world, lies in relationship, lies in the quality of the relation that we are able to have with each other, in the quality of the relationship that we are able to have with money, with property, with nature. If we are able to respect all these aspects of life, because all of them are important, but they need to be respected. Even money needs respect. You cannot throw money around like a crazy person, it will vanish. So everything in life needs respect, and the quality of relationship is very important. And to be aware of the kind of relationship that we are having is the key. Because Krishnamurti also said that it is in relationship that we can see ourselves. Because it is in relationship that we become greedy. It is in relationship that we become jealous, that we become envious. And if we want to know ourselves, we have to look at that, what really is happening. and not justify it. Suppose I am jealous of my husband and I justify it saying, but he's my husband, he cannot do this or that. Immediately, that justification stops me to see what really is going on. It stops me to see that I am insecure, that I have this dominance, that I want things to be the way I want them to be. So the quality of our relationship, I feel, is really the key, and to be aware of it. It is not easy, you see, but Krishnamurti never promised an easy way. He never said, listen to me and everything will be fine, it is very easy. No, he said, you need to do very hard work. It demands very hard work. So it is not easy, but it is not impossible. Because he would not be talking about something that is impossible for us just to be working on it without ever having the possibility to come across it. So it is possible. And the difficulties are created by our own mind, by our own beliefs. So the first thing is to realize what are the anchors that we are having. We anchor ourselves into this heaviness of me and mine, and we don't see in which way we are anchored. So, and we don't even know where those anchors are. We just cannot walk because we are tied up, but we don't know where is the tie? How can I make it loose? So, but we don't know because we don't look. We don't give attention. We just go on. We have some set of beliefs. We have some set of tradition that tells me how to behave as a wife, as a person, as a mother, as a friend. And I just follow that pattern without ever looking at it, ever questioning it. So I think this is what I wanted to share. And I please ask somebody to also contribute with a little bit so that it.
Thank you, Clemis. I think you have spoken very well and very simply put. It's very important for all of us to not only see how we relate to things around, but also to ourselves, to our ideas, and so on. I think you have placed it very well. Thank you so much for doing it. May I request Harshji to make some observations in the next 10-15 minutes? Please unmute yourself.
I'm trying to.
Yeah. Please unmute. Unmute yourself. Yes.
I'm unmuting, but it says the host is unmuting me.
Yes. You are
Can you hear me now?
You can hear you, yes.
All right. First, let me thank you for bringing up this question of relationship. I think it is, it's not talked about enough. Or if it is, it's talked about in some very romantic, nothing was talked about in this very official and romantic way. You see it all around. And it interests me, before I say any more, it interests me that you were in Brazil and did you ever meet the Instituto Cultural Krishnamurti, the Krishnamurti Committee in Brazil? I don't know if you did, but you seem to have connected with the Theosophical Society, but not with the Krishna Committee in Brazil. There is one. Yeah.
Yeah, I explained it to you. I looked for it.
I can't hear you. Sorry?
I looked for it very much but I could not find anybody. And there was one person, but it was very far away from where I was staying. And I could not travel. It is strange how life is, no? I never happened that I could go there, but somehow I could come to India. Anyhow, but
where in Brazil, may I ask, are you? You're not in Brazil just now. I can see you in the Philosophical Society at the moment.
Okay, I was in touch with some people.
I don't want to waste people's time, but I can put you in touch with everybody in Brazil, because I know I've been in Brazil many times, all over the place, to all different cities. And I know the groups, the committees in Brazil, so I can always put you in touch. But yeah, let's go on to the question.
But let me just say, I am living in Chennai now for the past 6 years. So, and I have.
So you live in Chennai.
In Brazil either. So.
Okay, all right. So I was just thinking about what you, about life being, I wish somebody had told me when I was in school or when I was a young man that the really important thing is relationship. And so I had to discover it the hard way. I think most of us discovered the hard way that even if you get money or even if you have position or whatever it is and comfort, eventually it's going to be a good relationship that is going to determine the quality of your life. So, you know, and by the time we come upon it, also we have no idea of how, what this is. We may try, we may read people who tell us how to live and so on. But when it comes down to actually having good relationships, that's a very different thing. And you can't love, you can't set out and say, I'm going to love, you know, because then you discover that you don't really have that much of a capacity to love. So I think an important thing here is that we need to be aware of the movement of relationship. That's what Krishnamurti was saying. How a relationship actually functions, how you are, and also how relationship forms the self. Because how did we ever get to be the persons we are today, what we call ourselves? It has really grown in relationship. You know, as a young child, maybe I watched something, read something, and it made me feel I want to be like this, or this is what I want to do in my life. And observing people around you, you know, I see in India that people in India still throw their dogs all the time. While in England, where I spend most of my time, everybody loves dogs and pets. So just seeing society around you, you absorb all these things and they become part of yourself. And so one of the things I think that Krishnamurti tells us is that we need to observe the process by which the self is formed in relationship. It isn't just a question of having a good relationship, it's also a question actually happening in our relationship, how it's influencing us, how it's making us who we are. So that I think is an important point to add to what you were saying. But I think you pointed out very well the situation we find ourselves in. And the central role of relationship in all of this. And also, you also mentioned that how do we even get, what is Krishnamurti saying, how do we proceed with this question of relationship? And he's saying that this is a learning about oneself, that probably the central to this thing is learning about oneself. And how do we learn about oneself? Where do we see the self in action? See, you can sit quietly in a room and imagine that your mind is silent. You can so-called meditate by sitting for a long time, and your mind does question. Where do you see yourself in action? That always rears its head. Relationship. You know, I'm driving along in a car and I'm quite peaceful and watching everything carefully. And then suddenly somebody gets in my way, and suddenly an anger flares up inside me. And it's only when events occur in relationship or somebody says something to me, then all my feelings come up. Or maybe if I'm not very controlled, I even strike out, or so we see who we are through events that occur in relationships. So if we want to study what the self is, then that is where we have to turn our attention as to what is actually happening moment to moment in relationship, and not relationship just with people. What is our relationship to nature? How do we regard it? Do we feel? See, it's very difficult to tell what you feel about nature. But you may just go out and cut a tree, so without thinking. And so your relationship to nature may be to dominate. To, you know, man should dominate nature. It's only if you're watching this you begin to discover. Or you may feel and understand that we are all actually part of nature, and we're just part. You know, we are just in this. What exactly is our relationship to nature and technology? You know, the big thing these days. What is our relationship to technology? Some people fear it. Some people say it's too much. Some people say it's very helpful, which it is. Some people, you know, so people will have, what is one's relationship? It isn't just human or personal relationships. Our relationship to the environment, relationship to, of course, people, to animals, to all of that. To discover, it's a discovery. It's not, it's at first it seems like we should say we have to have good relationships. We have to care for nature. We must use technology in the right way, not overuse it, and so on. But very soon, if we start trying to do a good thing, we discover that there are things in us, in the self, that prevent us, that we aren't even aware of. Becoming self-aware and becoming aware of all this is basically begins to lead to goodness and to good relationship. So I think this is an important factor of education. I've been in education. I've taught in Krishnamurti school for most of my life. And what you were saying about attention, you know, I just want to say something. An example of what you say in my maths class, because I taught maths. There was a student who was usually okay, but suddenly they were not attentive. They weren't doing their homework. So one option would have been to say, why aren't you doing your homework? You'd better do your homework. Let me make sure you do it. Give it to me by such and such a time, and so on. You know, and essentially to take a very harsh tone with them. But because classes are small and because the school is committed to paying attention and understanding each student, which is what the basics of education in Brockwood in the Krishnamurti school is. So I asked him what was going on. Well, it turned out that at home, he had a pet dog, and the pet dog had died, and he was feeling very sad. And so his attention wasn't there in the class. So instead, we talked about that and not about whether he did his maths and he must do his maths and he should do his maths, which would have been the easy way out of all of this. So I completely sympathize with what you were saying earlier about how we as parents or as teachers or even as rulers of government or so on, want to impose things because in some ways it's easy, it's less effort, you know, it's the lazy option to just say, don't do this because you have the power to do that. That's very important. I don't know, we could talk. I would love to sit down with you and discuss these things rather than just talk like this. But I think I've probably said enough. Maybe other people can say something.
May I just give another example of one situation that we never think about. You see, when I was working in Brazil in the police, then I had a boss and he was always giving interviews in the TV and all these things. And then one day in the evening, he was supposed to give an interview and he said, I'm so tired. I am not willing to do this interview. Can you please talk to these people? They will come, so you have to stay a little bit later. I said, fine, I can do that, no problem at all. So I stayed later and I was alone, everybody went, and the TV people came and we would be live, you know, it was a live interview for the news there. So they set up all the things and they have a small TV where it keeps on running the news that are already going on so that they know what's the timing for them to come in. When I was there waiting with them, there came a news. And the news was about a family, poor people, who moved from one state to another to take care of a house where the person was hardly being there. So it was the wife, 2 kids, and the husband. So they were there alone, and the owner of the house was hardly there. I think it was a weekend house or something like that. Anyhow, one day, the neighbor has the small kid, 5 years old, the girl, and 3 years old, the boy. So the neighbor used to come and give them some sweets and things. One day, the neighbors did not see the wife anymore. So they asked him, what happened to your wife? And he said, she ran away with another man. So they say, okay, I'm so sorry to hear that, fine. So the time passed, the days passed, and one day the neighbor went there to give a cake to the children because she got worried, no mother. So the girl came and said, when she was sleeping, he put her under the bed. And at night, he put her in the well. So the child told. So he immediately called the police and all these things. This was in the news. The police came, found the body, so that was the thing that called my attention. The police took the children because they had no relatives in the city. They took the children and gave those 2 small children who had been heavily traumatized, seeing all these things happening and having to be quiet all this time. And maybe they were even afraid of the father, God knows. They took the father in custody to prison, and the children they gave into these institutions where the children, no father, no mother, stay. Orphanage. We know very well what happens in those places. So my question, that shocked me so much. And my question was, who committed the greatest crime in this situation? Was it not the government? And everybody was happy because the man was kept in jail. Nobody thinks about those poor kids. And we think this is justice for us. You know, this is justice for us. And this is happening every day, everywhere in the world. This is so unjust. This is so cruel. And we don't see it. So God only knows what happened to these kids, you know, after seeing all these horrible things, to be in an orphanage. My God, this really shocked me to no end. And when I talked to my son, he said, what will you do? There is no other way. I said, there is no way because we don't think, because we don't have love, because I'm sure there are always families who will be open to take these kids in. But the government does not have such program because this gives a lot of work, you know. And people don't want work. But they will have much more work when these kids grow up and turn out to become criminals. The damage is much bigger, and that is only one side of it, let alone the human side of it. To condemn these 2 kids to such a horrible fate. Anyhow. And for most of the people, this is okay. That this is justice.
Thank you, Clemens. I think
May I say something?
it's very important that we see ourselves where we are, and unless we do that, there won't be any change. Individual has to change, then only there is a hope of something happening in the society. Harshad Bhai wants to say something. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Every human being wants to be happy. And to be happy, we we cannot be happy if our relationship there is a conflict, friction. And why there is a conflict, friction happens because there is no clarity about our own mind. So finally, the crisis which we see in the world is actually the crisis in the mind. uh, when we don't understand, when we don't have clarity, we cannot see what is right and what is wrong, then that expresses itself in society. So I consider relationship is at physical level, but if, if the mind is not good, not clear, then physical relationship cannot be happy. But Krishnamurti talks about something even beyond our physical and mental relationship. It is about being free from the image which we carry, even within the family or in the office or about people. And that is the real beauty, I feel, that uh, having a mind which is very clear and silent and looking, and in that naturally there will be good relationship at mental and physical level also. So the real thing is to be very clear about our mind, what is happening. And if we are not curious to look at our own mind, and there is a lot of confusion, then it will express in relationship with people around. So finally, it comes down to looking at our own mind, how what is going on inside, and ability to look at it. And that looking is not through thinking. Is there is something called awareness, which Krishna ji talks about, which is not thinking. And as long as that awareness is not awakened, then only thinking exists and it creates many, many problems. So finally, it comes down to having awareness, awakening of awareness, which can see what the thinking is doing, or when there is a anger is coming, when there is a conflict coming, to see it coming. And it requires a kind of alertness, moment by moment awareness. So finally, it comes down to that. So, and this is, I don't think this can be taught. Even in schools where I taught for many, many years, one can talk about it to even with students, but this awareness doesn't come unless we are very, very curious, even when we are not doing anything, ability to be alone and curious about what is happening. And that is the way I learned from Krishna ji, by being alone, looking. And then initially one has to be alone, but then later on it can function with people in relationship, looking all the time without any effort. You know. Okay, I have finished.
Thank you, Arshad Bhai. We can take up questions now. Clemens would try and answer them. So anybody having any questions?
May I say something brief?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think we should recognize, as Arshadji is saying, that relationship is happening all the time, including now, at this moment. How are we responding to what is being said? Are we taking it? Are we following? Are we thinking for ourselves? Are we just quiet? I mean, what's going on? The self-awareness is really needs to be moment to moment, and we don't have to go away and look for relationship. Every moment we are in relationship to something or someone.
We have two raised hands, Azra and Dinesh ji. So please, Azra, go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dubey sir, and thank you, Clemens, for such enriching views you have shared. I have one question. Why do we seek pattern in relationships? The pattern of, the socially desirable set of role expectations, and then later get stuck in those patterns. So why do we seek that pattern? That is one of my questions I wanted to ask. Thank you.
See, I think we don't really seek patterns. They are given to us since very early in life. And we just follow with them through life without ever questioning anything. And without even seeing that we are following a pattern. Our blindness is such that we are not even aware that we are following a pattern. We think that's the way of life, my mother lived like this, my grandmother lived like this. That's how everybody is living. So that's how I should live. And that is one thing. And the next thing is why those people who may see that they are in a pattern and they are scared of breaking them, because they feel if I break this pattern, then I'm not belonging to this group anymore. They may throw me out. I will be alone. What will happen to me? So all these things come, and all these things are created by thought, because we don't really know what will happen. People who have standalone, like Krishnamurti, when he had his own perception and he stand for it, and he had to leave the society. They asked him to leave, I feel it has to be very difficult for anybody to take that position, because he was brought up with all these people. These were the people he knew. And so he just said, that's not how I see it. And the people were not ready to listen, and he was asked to leave, and he didn't know what was going to happen. Anything may have happened. But because he was faithful to what he saw, he stands for it. And I think that is one of our difficulties. We don't have that strength to stand for what we see. We justify and say, no, but see, that's difficult because I have children, I have a wife, and all those things. All those are excuses. Of course, the wife is there, the children are there. But when we really stand, because we don't know, because we assume always the bad thing will happen. May not. You see, Krishnamurti, after he left the society, he got so many friends and so many people supported him, and he spoke and he did his task, which was to bring us this teaching. So we don't really know, and we assume too much.
Thank you, Clemens.
Thank you,
Dinesh ji, please go ahead.
Madam, I want to ask you a question. Don't you feel that this ambition, evolution, comparison is a natural process of human mind? And because one wants to do something better in his life, so these all factors come into the picture. And don't you feel that, do you feel that really this goodness can be flourished or flowered without spiritual awakening or spiritual values come into picture?
See, I think we make a mistake when we separate spirituality from daily life. So to me, personally, spirituality is goodness. A spiritual person is that one which is good. Good not in the sense, this common good that we see being nice. That is not goodness. Genuine, the person who is not selfish. That is goodness. And to me, that is spirituality. So the flowering in goodness, in fact, is flowering in spirituality. That's how I see it. I don't believe, I cannot see that there can be any spirituality for a person who is selfish, thinking about herself all the time, thinking how I am going to get enlightenment. I need to be enlightened. I have to find a way. I will do this. I will do that. I will climb the highest mountain to get enlightened. That is pure selfishness. And there is no spirituality in it whatsoever, as far as I can see.
What about
Yeah,
this
it's
comparison, evolution, and this thing, ambition?
What is that? Can you please repeat it?
What do you think this ambition, comparison, evolution, this is also a natural process of human mind, and one has to face this in life as a natural process?
See, I tell you, I can only tell you what I have lived and how I see it. Okay. First of all, I don't think it is a natural thing. Okay. I think this ambition and all these things, competition, all this has been taught. We have learned this from childhood. You know, it's not a natural thing. A child is not competitive. If you see a child, most of them at least, they share their things with another child that they never saw before. There is no thinking about this is this. I give you an example. My family in Brazil, most of the people there, they speak only German. And most of us speak also Portuguese. So the kids, when they come together in a family gathering, there are those who don't speak Portuguese, only speak German. But they play the whole day together. They don't understand what they don't talk. They keep on playing and there is perfect harmony among them. This ambition is something that is told to us that it is important to be somebody in this life. We don't need to be anybody. We are already somebody. We have been born. We are a human being. What else can we be? So this whole thing is a misunderstanding of life. You know, somehow, I don't know at which point human beings have become very degenerated. The human in us is yet to flower. This animalistic thing, which is this me and mine, and if you see the dogs, they are the same. They fight for a bone, they fight for territory, like we do. So this is not natural to human beings. This is natural for the dogs, but not for human beings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Clemens. I think Mr. Ramarao has a question. Please go ahead.
Sir, I want to say something. In day-to-day life, it seems lot of patterns, lot of the systems. Everybody have their system. Society has its system. House has its system. Each person has its system. So everybody, it looks, including me, living in this specific format. So in these circumstances, can one say that he has the relationship with another? That is the first question. Second one is that when we seeing in ourselves, we look into ourselves, we can see that lot of fears, lot of phobias, lot of the uncertainties, turmoil. But in external world, everything it expects in the specific format. Means like a fixed, static. So it seems to me continuous conflict. This is my second question. What one can do? Two questions. Harshiji can help me out.
Yeah, I don't know if I understood your question properly. So the first question, Can you repeat the first question?
You say that in our society, in our family, in our society, in our country, everybody have their own systems. Everybody have their own conditioning, including me. How one can relate to other in such a circumstances?
Yeah,
That is the first question.
Yeah, that I will answer that, and then we talk about the other. I will not answer, in fact, because I'm not the all-knower person at all. I'm just learning. See, the whole thing is this. I will tell a small story. Once a person who was having kind of a problem like this one that you are describing went to see Ramana Maharshi. And this person told Ramana Maharshi, see, I am so tired of this whole thing, conflict, and I cannot relate with, in the office, at home, in the family. Everything is so difficult. Can you please tell me, how do I relate with others? Ramana Maharshi was a person who was not speaking much. He was silent for some time. And this man had traveled 2 days to ask this question. So he insisted. And he said, I traveled such a long journey. I need an answer. I will not leave if you don't give me an answer. Tell me, how do I relate with others? Ramana looked to him and said, there are no others. So the whole problem, we think it is with others, but the whole problem is within us. So the way to relate with others is we have to learn about ourselves in this relation with what we call others. We always expect the other to change. We expect the other to be different. But we never look at us. Can I change? Can I be different from this? Maybe that expectation itself is the problem in relationship. We expect too much from others. And we assume that we are always perfect. That we are always doing the right thing. Yeah, the problem is always the other. Whereas if we look, if we are willing to look really honest, we may see that the whole problem lies within.
I just want to add to what Clemens says, Mr. Rama, it's very important that we question the values that society is talking about. Not accept things as they are, but question them, not in a violent way. Because if you want to lead a different way or kind of life, then we must ask questions, not accept what the society is saying. And find our own values. What is the right thing to do? Rather than become a part of the society and then complain that what can I do? I have to be a part of it. You know, I have to follow the rules of the society. But who has told us to follow the rules? Why can't we question them? Very important to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. This questioning, you see, does not mean that now you don't do anything that you should do in like taxes and all these things that you should do. That's not it. The questioning is more within you. Not that you go about now questioning all the people, why are you doing this? Why this, why that? It is within you. Because we are part of this whole thing, of this society. We have created it. So we are also responsible for it. So we have to understand it, what is happening, why it is like that. And not blindly following everything and just saying that's how it is, what to do. You see, when I saw this situation that I just talked about, the child, I could not do anything. But the fact that it hit me so deeply, that changed so many things in me. And it showed me other things also. It showed me how insensible one can be. We always relate that we have to do something about. If you question the society, then you have to do something about. You have to understand what's going on. That's the point.
Yes, Mr. Tarun Kumar has a question. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Mr. Tarun Kumar.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes, please go ahead.
I have a question. Whether there is a relationship possible boundaries of need, greed, satisfaction in return, and attachment. These four pillars.
So what is the question really? I could not understand.
Any relationship is possible beyond the limits of need, greed, satisfaction in return, and attachment.
See, when we say things like relationship is only possible and we give the guidelines, then we are creating illusion. Relationship is happening right here, right now. Besides all our greed, all our illusions, besides everything we are, it is happening. We may, you see, Krishnamurti, when he talks of relationship, he may be talking about the real relationship which happens once one is free, but that's not our reality. We are not free. We are what we are, and we have to start from what we are. We cannot start from some imaginary thing like relationship only happens in such and such conditions. It is happening right here, right now, but it is very degenerated. It is creating horrible things in the world. It is creating misery for humanity. It's creating pain for ourselves also. So that is the important thing to know, to understand, and to start from where we are. I just want to say one more thing. You see, Krishnamurti, he saw something. He lived in truth. We live in illusion. So for us to just repeat what he said and think that we are seeing what he said, it is another illusion. So to see what he saw, we have to see first ourselves. And then we may see something that we will never know if that what we don't know what it is. So we have to understand that Krishnamurti, he was telling us something very important, but as far as we don't see it for ourselves, it is not a reality for us. And that has been the problem that all religion people have created, because Jesus says something they never saw what he said, and they keep on repeating without seeing it, and that becomes a belief. So we have to be very careful that we don't turn Krishnamurti's teachings into another belief, because we are the same people who have done that to Christianity, who have done that to Hinduism, to the Muslim world, everywhere. We are these people. So we have to be careful that we don't do it again. Because here we have such a precious thing, you know?
May I say something?
Yes, yes, please, Harshad, you go ahead.
In this field of the mind, psychology, spirituality, there is no authority. We cannot make even Krishnamurti into an authority. We have to see for ourselves, and when we see for ourselves, then authenticity comes, and then the way we communicate, it would be also very clear. When there is a clarity within, then it will express itself in relationship too. then there will be listening and learning and looking. And what Krishnaji talks about, the real relationship is the relationship without having images about each other. And that is a very, very rare phenomenon happens. And we try to be good. It doesn't work also. Because as long as the self is there, there will be selfishness, there will be images, there will be conflict. So if we really want to live in a very happy, healthy, creative way, then we have to look at what is preventing that, what is the source from where our problems are coming in relationship. And for that, one has to really probe the deepest layer. And that itself again requires the freedom, curiosity to look what is happening within. So this is the most difficult thing for people, to be alone, to be silent, to be curious and looking inward, to look at the beginning of a thought. And people who can really do that, they may find that there is nothing happening. And at that time, when there is no thought, there could be fear also in many people, that they don't like that state in which there is no self, no thinking, and they try to avoid and get involved into some activities to escape. So our life is mostly escaping from looking inward, looking very, very clearly. And that's why the problems in humanity will continue. But for some few people who are very, very passionate and who want to go really to the source of this self, maybe there is possibility exists for few people. Okay, I finish.
Let me just say something. Harshaji has been saying that everybody wants to be happy, and to me that's the problem. Because we want to be happy, and because we want to be happy, we are willing to do anything for that happiness. And in this anything, you can say anything really, because that's what we have been doing. We justify greed. We justify the murder of millions in wars. We justify anything because we want to be happy.
Yeah.
And we want to be happy, and then we are in an unhappy marriage, so we change the partner and we don't care about the kids that are left behind because we want to be happy. And nowadays, modern society is saying you have to be happy. Wonderful. So it is just becoming worse and worse. So there is happiness, but not when we want it.
No, I want to say,
it is just a natural state of human beings. It is happiness, the real state. But because we want it, that's the problem.
May I say, there is one sentence, you take it like, I want happiness. If you remove I, want will go, only happiness remains. So real happiness is when there is no I. And that is the thing we have to really look at. That there is no happiness as long as there is I, because then there will be want will remain. You know?
So there is no happiness as long as there is somebody wanting it.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is something to understand and forget about wanting it.
May I say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
One thing I think I should mention when it is very hard to look at the depths of the self. And one of the most difficult things to face in oneself, you can see it outside you. And you were referring to it, is sorrow, is sadness, is that depth of sorrow that is actually there in every human being. And to allow yourself to feel that and discover what it is, and discover the depth of it, and recognize it, and be aware of it as something that you have, just like the rest of the world, is our mind doesn't want to do it. In fact, the whole entertainment industry is escape. It has been set up for escape. So that is what we have. But escape from us. I think it is how important we make the entertainment industry, how we pay those people highly, because it's a way that when we are feeling by ourselves, feeling lonely, we are, we can escape into this fantasy, this unreal illusion that is being presented to us on the screen. And that is, so we must be aware of our tendency to escape as well.
Thank you, Harshji. Thank you. Sushilji, can we close now? It's beyond 12:30. So,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Just thanks to the speaker and everybody, and please announce next Sunday's lecture so that other can know.
Okay. So thank you, Clemens, for being with us and giving such a thoughtful discourse. It was very nice. I hope we'll have you sometimes again to talk to all of us. Next Sunday, we have Mr. Murli Menon, who is associated with the study center in the Valley School. So Murli will be talking to us, and at the same time, same link. So you're all welcome to join us once again. With these words, I once again thank Clemens and all the participants who joined us. Thank you very much, especially Harshji. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Clemens. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Please close. Kamleshji, please close it.